And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford, and I'm joined by my guy Harrison Brown. As we're going to talk about those Philadelphia Eagles who just wrapped up OTAs, mandatory minicamp, whatever you want to call it. They just wrapped those up this past week or the week prior. I know it just happened earlier this month. So they just wrapped this up as they get prepared for training camp next one, which should be exciting for this team who made the playoffs last year after a 2-5 start, and now they're looking to build off of that performance, especially with the pieces that they added in the offseason. However, before we do that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. You're checking out the podcast on Spotify. Again, if you got a smartphone, I'm pretty sure everybody does in 2022, got a smartphone, go on Spotify, search Total Sports Live, TSL Podcast. Appreciate everyone that tunes in, listens. You can leave ratings now on Spotify. I don't know if people know that you can leave ratings now and reviews on Spotify. So if you want to do that, you can also do that. Well, we really appreciate that. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and lastly, which this podcast is posted on anchor.fm. So you can find it all there. So there's no excuses. You can find the podcast everywhere. And it's on YouTube as well. So if you miss it, you can catch it on YouTube. And the video you can catch on Spotify as well. Can't forget that part. You can catch it all. So got a great show for this one. Harrison, back at it again. We're back for week 2. I'm surprised we're back at it for week 2. And we're probably going to be back at it again for week 3. So we're getting in motion here, getting in rhythm. Last week we talked about the Phillies and their struggles, and now they got hot. So I think we're like bringing like some good luck here. And we talked about the NBA Finals, which has been very exciting. But we're going to switch tables here and talk about those Philadelphia Eagles. But before we do that, how's everything going, man? Back at, like I said, for episode 2 of the summer for us.
Man, everything's good. Like you said, summer podcast here. We're getting it rolling. Sunday night, only right we talk about some football. So looking forward to getting into it, talking about these birds, man. I'm pretty optimistic about this year, so should be a good show.
It definitely should be a good show. Yes, we're talking football, not the USFL. Shout out to the USFL as
Go
well. But we're
Stars.
talking right. Go Stars. Go Blob. Go Blob. Man.
Right.
Blob. But we're talking about the other Philadelphia team, the Eagles. And the first thing we got to talk about when we talk about these Eagles is Jalen Hurts. There's been a lot of conversation ever since the playoff game happened against the Buccaneers. A lot of talks about Jalen Hurts because remember a lot of people thinking, well, if the Eagles, first round pick, they might have to either pick on this quarterback, that quarterback, and just a lot of discussion even after the draft. There's a lot of discussion saying, look at what the Eagles did in the offseason. If he doesn't get it done, hey, the Eagles still have a first round pick to get a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud. A lot of conversation. Don't understand why there's a lot of conversation. Well, I do, but a lot of conversation surrounding the young quarterback. However, Harrison, it's been reported multiple times already this offseason that Hurts is showing improvement during mandatory mini camp, and even his head coach is taking notice as well. He said that he's noticing a big difference. He said, what I see is a crisper ball. The accuracy I've been very pleased with. You can just see him taking strides every single day with his accuracy because of the fundamentals he has with his feet and upper body. And I feel like that's always the conversation we've had in our group chats, just about the little mechanics. But those things come in time, right? They come in time as a young quarterback. You're not going to step on the field day one in the NFL and just have everything down packed. Every quarterback goes through that through that learning curve, and I think this could be the year that he takes off. For the Eagles to win this division, potentially make a deep run into the postseason, we already know there's going to be a lot of responsibility laid at the feet of Jalen Hurts. The young quarterback, we know, wasn't horrible for his first year starting, but like we said, there were some limitations that were expected until his first season. Even if you don't want to realize that, there was. So that being said, everything that's happened so far in the summer as we get prepared for training camp, what are just your expectations for Hurts heading into his third year, but only his second year as the full-time starter?
I think this is going to be a big year for Jalen. I think they've done a nice job building up around him, adding some pieces on the offense, as we all know. But I think when you get right down to it, Jalen's a great quarterback. I think Jalen's a very talented guy, very athletic, can make plays with his legs. But what I really like about Jalen was the steps he took last year as a passer. Just those steps from his rookie year to that second year, that first full year as a starter, something we talked about a lot. It was basically his rookie year last year. You know what I mean? He started a few games in that 2020 season. But last year was really our first full look at Jalen Hurts, and he made a lot of great plays last year. Made a lot of plays like plays in that Denver game, some great throws in that Denver game to guys like Devonta Smith. And, I just think it's going to be a big year for Jalen Hurts. I think that he's going to take that step that the Eagles need him to take in terms of being that guy who can lead them to the division win, to playoff win, something a lot of people have been chirping about. But listen, last year they ran up against Tom Brady in the playoffs. I mean, that's a tough matchup for your first playoff game for Jalen. So I'm really optimistic about Jalen's year this year, and I think he's gonna have a big year.
Yeah, I don't know how many young quarterbacks would do well in that environment going against defending Super Bowl champions in the first round. I mean, we saw Mac Jones in the same round of the playoffs just look absolutely just lost in the sauce against, the Buffalo Bills. And I think that's just comes with the territory for a young quarterback. And anytime you get a young quarterback and get you there, it's a positive. Regardless of how they get there, it doesn't matter, right? Because there's a lot of conversation around Hurts saying, well, the Eagles run the ball too much, or we all know the infamous what was that, the infamous Detroit Lions game where Hurts only had 11 passes and he just ran the ball, down Detroit's throat, which is no problem. I don't think there's a, big issue from that. And, Nick Sirianni, said that, because the Eagles, I think, were ranked like 25th in passing, that he said he wants to, increase that number, get higher in the rankings. And Hurts knows what's expected of him and what he needs to do, get the ball to his, to his playmakers. But what I've also found more interesting about Hurts is that, and I don't know, you might have brought this up before, is that this is like he's gonna be in the same offense now for the consecutive year. Every year it's been something different from him, even in college, something different. And now he's gonna have some consistency and cohesion where he's in the same offense with the same head coach, with the same offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, etc. Everything's now more cohesion for year two, which to me, I think that's great news for him because it's like you're going into an offseason knowing everybody's still here. We know what we have to do to improve, and everybody's on the same page.
Oh, it's huge. And, and like you said, it goes all the way back to college for him. You know what I mean? Going from Alabama to Oklahoma, and he goes to the NFL, works with Doug Peterson in year one. Doug Peterson's let go. Sirianni comes in. So it's huge for him to have that second year in the same offense. And like, like we mentioned, building around him too, adding pieces to that offense, making it a better offense. That offensive line is strong again this year. The run game should be talented. So it's there's reason to be optimistic about the Eagles for sure, and especially on offense. And if Jalen does take those steps, if he really does take those steps towards becoming one of those top tier quarterbacks in the NFL, the sky is the limit for this Eagles team. It's really exciting. So I think him going back in the offense for the second year is definitely going to be big. Shane Steichen's going to be taking over as the play caller this year. That's an interesting little tidbit, but I don't think it's something that should, drastically change the offense. I think the, offense we saw last year was a pretty flexible and multiple offense. It's going to kind of work around their players, work to their players' strengths. Like you mentioned, the Eagles were lower in passing last year. They started running the ball. Hey, that Detroit game, Jalen Hurts only throws the ball 11 times. They blew the Lions out. We'll take a win every day of the week, right? Like it'd be a problem if the Lions had blown the Eagles out and Jalen Hurts only threw the ball 11 times. We'd be like, why is Jalen only throwing the ball 11 times?
Right.
If you're blowing teams out, man, let's keep it going. So I'm really optimistic about this year for the Eagles.
And that was the working success for that team, right? They really they because remember the first 7 weeks they didn't have no identity. They didn't know what they were doing. Hurts was throwing the ball a lot of times, but you shouldn't have been throwing a lot of times because there was no balance. They figured out that balance and figured out our bread and butters in the run game. Nobody's stopping us when we have Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, that trio of running backs in running with the offensive line, pushing people, and then you got a quarterback that can affect the game with his running ability. That's hard to stop, and Eagles saw that. So why would they, switch and be like, no, on second thought, we want the quarterback to throw 30 times? Like, no, if it's working, it's working for them. And like you mentioned, he has, more, he has more weapons to his availability now. Eagles obviously traded for AJ Brown, who's one of his best friends. They get him to go in line with Devonta Smith. They add Zach Pascal, a solid veteran receiver who can work in the slot. They still got Quez Watkins. They still got Jalen Reagor. They have Dallas Goedert, who I think that connection between them two are only going to get better, as we saw flashes of that last year. They got them. I mean, shoot, running backs. They got the running backs. They got Scott. They got Sanders. Everything's in piece for him to take that, next level and jump, for him and for this team. And I think, one thing Eagles fans have to do is be patient. Don't come in here thinking that guns blazing that he's going to come out, throwing 4 touchdowns a game, Patrick Mahomes type style. No, and I think what bothers me the most about the Hurts conversation this offseason is people saying, well, he has no excuse. There's no more excuses for him. And it's like he never made an excuse to begin with.
And also, you never know what's going to happen throughout a season. I mean, knock on wood, everybody's hoping for the best, but like crazy things happen when you're talking about a football season. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
The whole no excuse thing, I haven't been a big fan of that either. It's all kind of outside noise, though. I think at the end of the day, as long as they're good at the NovaCare complex, you know what I mean? As long as the coaching staff, front office is on board with what Jalen's been doing, on board with how he's been playing, his teammates, you know what I mean? I think that's all that matters. But I think at the end of the day, it's a huge year for Jalen. Just contract wise, his rookie deal, it's not up after this year, but we're getting towards the back end of it, right? Like we're getting towards that time where the contract's going to be a discussion soon in terms of him. He can kind of definitely add some value to that contract with a big year this year. If he goes out and has a big year, maybe makes the Pro Bowl, wins a playoff game, the Eagles are the NFC East champions, that contract is definitely more valuable than, if they make the wild card and just kind of sneak in and it's an okay year. So it's definitely, it's a big year for Jalen. I wouldn't say at all it's a make or break year, though. You know what I mean? I don't really love that, pressure that's been kind of thrown on. I think that this is still early in his career, but I think that with the talent they have, with him coming back for the second year in the offense, he's starting to become more of an established NFL player, not a rookie anymore. You know what I mean? He kind of knows what he's getting into. It's a big year. I have high expectations.
Definitely is a big year. And like you said, we Eagles fans can't look at it that way just because, all right, if Hurts doesn't have that great of a year, are you really ready and willing to really start over with another rookie quarterback and say, let's do it again with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud? And don't get me wrong, right? Those two guys were outstanding last year, mind-blowingly good with some of the wide receivers who are going to be rookies this year, right? Mind-blowingly good. But now we're going to see how defenses in teams adjust to those guys now. We're going to see if Bryce Young can be that same Bryce Young that we saw, without a Jamison Williams this year, and we're going to see the same thing with CJ Stroud. Can CJ Stroud continue to take that next step without, a Chris Olave and a Garrett Wilson now? So we're going to see a lot with that. And I don't, in that, I think into itself, should pump the brakes for Eagles fans because there are worse quarterback situations out there. There are quarterbacks, named Daniel Jones, who, have started 3 or 4 years and has been mediocre at best. So I think if he's still starting for 3 or 4 years, then I think Jalen Hurts should get the same, should get the same leeway as well. Because like you said, and I think even if you look at his stats from 2020 to 2021 and the full season, there was growth, right? You look at completion percentage, 52% to 61.3%. That's pretty noticeable, even though it's not he didn't have a lot of games in 2020. To take that leap tells me, okay, if he can get it to 64, 66% this year, Eagles should be in business in the passing game. He had 3,144 passing yards, 16 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions. Some of those interceptions wasn't even on him. If we're being real, you have that. He only took 26 sacks last year, which isn't bad. QBR went up from 33 to 48. Rushing yards, he almost pulled a Lamar Jackson and had 784 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. I'm the type of football fan. I don't care how my quarterback gets it done, as long as he gets it done, he gets it done. And if Hurts has 20 touchdown passes, but 10 rushing touchdowns, I don't see the problem. I don't see the problem at all.
No, I definitely agree. And like you said, he took a lot of growth statistically. I think the completion percentage stat is honestly very impressive considering he had more attempts in 2021 than he did in 2020. And he raised his completion percentage that much. 61%, that's right in there. You know what I mean? That's right in there to be a valid NFL quarterback if you're completing that many passes. Definitely, you know what I mean? It could go up to that 64, 65%. But like you said, with his rushing ability as well, if you're getting 20, 25 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, that definitely plays. That's a, you know what I mean? Those are playoff caliber stats from a quarterback. So, I'm definitely with you there.
It's almost, that would be almost, I want to say MVP type numbers. I'm trying to
Definitely.
think. Almost, it's close. It's close because
If
Lamar
he
and
got to
his.
that 1,000-yard rushing mark too, you know what I
Oh
mean? With
yeah,
3,000, yeah.
oh yeah. Because Lamar, you look at his second year when he took his leap, he went from 58% to 66%, 36 passing touchdowns, and he had 1,000 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. So 43 total touchdowns, 1,000-yard rusher. Yeah, it's possible. The sky's the limit for Jalen Hurts and for this offense. So it's definitely gonna be fun to see how that plays out. And we all know in the NFL, you only go as far as your quarterback takes you. The same thing in a lot of sports, like a pitcher, you're only going to go as far as your pitching staff takes you. So same thing with the Eagles. If they get a good Hurts and he continues to develop, and the mechanics are getting better, like we've heard, and that leads to the accuracy getting better, then that's only going to be great and bigger things for this Eagles offense. And talking more about that offense, they made a lot of moves, specifically on offense. They made the big blockbuster trade for AJ Brown on the day one of the draft, and that was a shocker to all of us. Nobody didn't expect that to happen when it came out of left field, and then that opened up the door for Hollywood Brown to get traded to the Arizona Cardinals. So that opened up the floodgates, and the Eagles get themselves a bona fide number one wide receiver in AJ Brown, who's had a pretty good start to his career for a second round pick. AJ Brown so far in his career, 185 receptions, 2,995 yards, 24 touchdowns last season in Tennessee. Dealing with some injuries, still played 13 games last year, 63 receptions for 869 yards and 5 touchdowns. His previous 2 seasons had 11 touchdowns and 8 touchdowns. Had 1,000 yards in his first and second years. Didn't have that in his third year just because of injury, but he was doing that with a guy in Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill's not that great. So I think he can do better. So when we look at these Eagles, talk about AJ Brown, Harrison, he said this past week that he believes that the team has two number one wide receivers in himself, believes the team has two number one wide receivers in himself and in Devonta Smith. We saw what Smith was able to do last season as the Eagles' number one wide receiver. Almost had 1,000 yards quietly. It wasn't like a Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase type of year for him, but it was a pretty good year because I think it was almost relative to the quarterback. He started to pick it up as the season progressed. And I mean, we remember the Broncos game. That was almost like his coming out party where he really started to show like, I'm that dude. Yep. I'm that dude. Just throw it up to me. I'm about to go get it. And I'm going to make that catch. He almost clipped the 1,000-yard mark. I think he set the record for Eagles rookie wide receiver in yards, I think, last year.
I think so too.
Surpassing Deshaun Jackson, which is no easy feat at all for this franchise. So is it feasible to think that the Eagles will have 2,000-yard wide receivers this year? And then let's also, after that, how do you think this wide receiver core looks on paper going to camp? Because there's a lot of interesting names, a lot of different guys. I know who you like have totally different skill sets that can really elevate and take this Eagles offense to the next level with how the game is being played.
Man, like we've been saying all podcasts, I mean, the sky's the limit for the Eagles offense. 2,000-yard receivers, it's possible. It's hard to do, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Devonta had a great rookie year, and the thing that I really keep coming back to about AJ Brown is I just love how well they complement each other. I love the fact that AJ Brown is that physical receiver who can really work over the middle of the field, but can also beat you deep. He has a great release off the line of scrimmage, and he can win vertically. And then Devonta is that speed guy, that real athletic guy who, even if he's not killing you vertically, his body control, his athleticism, the catches he can make on the sideline, the catches he can make even over the middle of the field, even though, in that draft process, everybody was worried about the smaller frame and things of that nature. But listen, Devonta Smith is a great receiver. He's a great football player. So that's the thing that I keep coming back to is just how well they complement each other. And then, like you mentioned earlier, you got Dallas Goedert rolling in the middle of the field, running corner routes from the tight end position, making plays. So it'll be interesting. Just the receiving room as a whole, I think it's going to be a big year for Quez Watkins. I think Quez Watkins could do some interesting things. I've heard some people mention maybe playing him outside a little bit more, using him as an outside receiver a little bit more if you get A.J. Brown going in the slot. definitely could be intriguing. They didn't do it as much last year. They had Jalen Reagor outside. Obviously we all know what's going on with Jalen Reagor the past few years. I'm still not out on Jalen Reagor having a good career. It might not be here in Philly. That's definitely a possibility. It might be somewhere else, but athletic guy, can make plays on punt returns, can make plays on kick returns. If you get him a screen and you get him blocking, he's going to make some plays. He might score. He might make someone miss. He might not be that number one receiver they drafted him to be. And Justin Jefferson going right after all the receivers that went later in that draft. It definitely hurts to look at that. But, if you just isolate it and look at Jalen Reagor as a player, I'm not out there as well. And they've got some, underrated guys as well that we could look at. But a guy that I keep coming back to is Greg Ward as well. I think that Greg Ward is just such a reliable pro, such a good slot receiver, reliable hands, can make plays in the red zone. I think that he's going to be a guy who's probably competing for a roster spot at this point, with the amount of guys that they have in that receiving room. But I like Greg Ward as well. So we'll get into some of the more underrated guys later in the pod. But I think for a receiving room that a few years ago was really thin and lacked in depth and was just, brutal with injuries and who they were running out there, I would definitely say that shouldn't be a problem this year.
It definitely shouldn't be a problem. And I'm trying to think who were the wide receivers when Wentz made that run in 2020. Who was on that team when
Greg
they made
Ward
the
was
playoffs?
making plays. I know
Yes,
that he had that
Yes.
touchdown against Washington, but he was like fresh out of the AAF, younger.
Yeah. He was.
It was,
I'm trying to pull this up like right now as we speak to see like
Yeah, I'm
who
trying to
was
think about
on.
some other guys too. Obviously,
Who was
Travis
on that
Fulgham
team.
had his run in 2020. That was, off the practice squad.
Was that 20? No, it's the 2019 team. 2019.
Right. Yeah, 2019. Yeah. I think who else?
Let's see. It was Alshon was still on the team. Alshon definitely
Burt, though, probably. I think he missed a lot of time, right?
Oh, there it was. Deontay Burnett.
Yeah, yup.
In the one that they proclaimed the preseason Julio Jones, the practice squad Julio Jones, Robert Davis.
I remember Robert Davis. Yeah, they did. 6'4" and fast. That was the story of Robert Davis. Everybody was excited. Listen, hey, those are great tangibles right there. Okay, we'll take that. All right. 6'4" and fast, we can make something happen. But yeah.
Hey, Mac Hollins.
Hey, shout out.
Josh Perkins. Josh Perkins as tight end. Oh, Jordan Matthews. So yeah, like you said, yeah, they definitely have come a long way and come a far way from that time. And like you said, you look at it, having those guys, I think, it's going to make life easier for Quez Watkins, right? Who I still think was a steal to this day where they got him at in the draft with his, playmaking ability and his speed that you just can't teach. Like, you get that man open in space, he can do some things with it. And like you said, Jalen Reagor, while yes, he hasn't lived up to the expectations that Justin Jefferson has done, what CeeDee Lamb has done, what even Brandon Ayuk has done. You put him now in this offense with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, him in the slot or on the field, things become easier for him. So it would not be surprising if, I'm not gonna say this will happen, but it would be surprising me if Jalen Reagor has like 4 touchdowns this year in some way, shape, or form.
Him improving. Taking natural steps as a pro. And like you mentioned, you put him next to all these pieces, things are definitely going to get easier for him. I could see him having a better year. Like you said, it might not be Brandon Ayuk. It might not be Justin Jefferson. You got to kind of temper the expectations a little, but that doesn't mean that Jalen Reagor can't become a very respectable pro. And like I said, it might not be here. We've seen it with other guys. They kind of go somewhere else and it's just a better fit. That might very well be the case, but I'm definitely not out on Jalen Reagor as a player.
Nah, it's hard to be out on someone who's only 23 years old.
Exactly. Right.
They're still trying. They're still trying to figure it out. If he can figure it out, and I think, like we said, with those guys around him, things are going to be easier. He's going to have some matches where he can exploit, and if he can do that, he's definitely going to make some heads turn. And then, like you said, they have Greg Ward, who just knows how to find his way into his zone. He'll find the hole in his zone, sit there. He'll catch it. Zach Pascal, another one of those guys who, solid veteran, good hands, won't make the flashy plays, but He'll be there when you need him the most. So you have him. And then, like you said, there's a lot of other guys who, we're going to talk about, later that could make some noise in camp and really push, the Greg Wards and the Jalen Ragers, for those last couple roster spots or even fighting to get on the practice squad, which is, very coveted, at this point. So, hey, we'll definitely see how this Eagles offense and wide receiving unit, starts to, get ramped up and see if they can make strides and take strides from last year into this year. This is Total Sports Live Podcast. I'm Jovan Alford, who's on the other side of the mic. Harrison Brown here talking about the Eagles as they just wrapped the minicamp of OTAs, which means the next time we won't see the Eagles is the next time we'll see them is in July. That's the next time we'll see them, and that's when the real thing begins. Training camp begins, which means preseason is almost here, which means the regular season is here, and that's when all the real fun begins. So we got to switch to the other side of the ball, Harrison, because just as amount of the moves that they made on offense were exciting. Howie Roseman in that front office pulled a complete 360 and said, we're getting playmakers on that defensive side of the ball. And they did that with Hasson Reddick, giving them a premier edge rusher off that edge, at linebacker, playing that mold, coming off the edge. They get James Bradberry not too long ago to shore up and get them a pretty good duo at corner between him and Slay. Then you add Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, and how can we also forget about Kazir White? They get Kazir White on a 1-year deal, making that linebacker unit look pretty special because you get a guy in Kazir White who not only can tackle and be effective and run against the run, but he can also cover too. And that's something we've been asking Eagles linebackers to do for a minute. So this defense, Harrison, with Jonathan Gannon in year 2, there should be this is a person where there should not be no excuses for is Jonathan Gannon, because he now has, I believe, the pieces to make this defense really work the way that it should work.
Yeah, this is a talented defense. They did a good job improving it. It was already a talented, there was pieces here on this defense. That defensive line was very strong last year. It got stronger this year, adding in Hasson Reddick and Jordan Davis for sure. And bringing back Derek Barnett as well. You've got Josh Sweat locked in. Brandon Graham is healthy and coming back. Fletcher Cox stayed around. Hargrave, it's a talented defensive line. They're going to get after people up front. You mentioned it. They improved the linebacker spot, picking up Kazir White. Definitely a talented guy, hard hitter who can play in coverage as well. And then Bradberry is a nice, piece with Slay. Steven Nelson moved on. He's with the Houston Texans now. I like that duo. It's not, outlandishly great. They could still run into some issues, but like you said, it's a solid duo. That's a very respectable 1-2 punch in the secondary. They brought back Anthony Harris on another 1-year deal. I think the defense should do good. Jonathan Gannon does give me a little bit of pause. There were some times last year where, let's just call it like it is. We all were kind of saying, what's going on here? We're in a lot of base defenses. Teams are kind of eating us up, so we'll
quarterbacks having 70% completion percentages.
I hear you. Right. I hear you. So there is some cause for concern there. He was getting some head coaching looks this year. And it seemed like the general sentiment, from the fans were kind of like, hey, good luck, take him, So, but no, it would be nice to see him take some steps this year too. Like you said, no excuses for Jonathan Gannon this year. If he could take some steps as a play caller, really kind of solidify that all down. But, just getting back to the defense as a whole, I think it's a really talented defense. Nakobe Dean playing in that linebacker spot with Kazir White, with TJ Edwards. I think Nakobe Dean was the steal of the draft for the Eagles. We talked on our pre-draft show about taking Nakobe Dean, mid-first with one of those first-round picks that the Eagles had. So to get him in the 3rd round because of shoulder concerns and just injury concerns as a whole, when it looks like he should be ready for opening day, just can't beat that.
No, you can't beat that, and knowing, like you said, Jonathan Gannon now has the pieces. He has everything that you need, especially at all 3 levels, which is something that we could not say about this Eagles defense last year, because it was always you have the line, your corners are good, but their linebacking core is a little suspect. Now it's like, okay, and we all know this in football, right? If your front 7 can do what they need to do, life for your corners becomes 10 times easier, right? If the front 7 can get pressure, then Slay and Bradberry won't have to cover long. Even though I'm not worried if they do have to cover long because I'm pretty confident in them. And we didn't even mention Avonte Maddox in the slot, who I think as we all probably knew this from the jump, is he should have been a slot quarter from the jump,
Facts.
and now he thrived in that role last season. Playing next to Nelson and Slay. Now he has Slay and Bradberry. So I mean, his life as a slot corner, gets even better. But one thing I do want to talk about with this defense, and I think it's going to probably be one of the interesting camp battles, is what's going to happen at the other safety spots since we're on the defense, right? They did resign Anthony Harris, which I like. I think Anthony Harris had a very solid year. I'm glad the Eagles were able to get him last year, even though I wanted him just a year sooner after the year he had in Minnesota, where he was just intercepting everything. So they did bring him back. There's no more Rodney McLeod. He's now with the Indianapolis Colts, where Frank Reich's just somehow just keep him bringing back former Eagles.
Literally.
I don't understand, but that's Frank Reich's going to do what Frank Reich does best. Hopefully, he can get a playoff win this year. I hope for his sake. So you have that, but there's a little bit of intrigue about who's going to win that other starting safety spot at free safety. And right now it's looking like Marcus Epps, which is a surprise because Marcus Epps has really had to work his way up the ranks here with the Eagles. He haven't, I think, wasn't he I swear he was an undrafted guy. He might have been
Yeah,
an
I think
undrafted
so.
guy.
He was on the practice squad and stuff, but he
Yeah.
has made some plays at this point now. Like he actually, he was decent last year at some points.
Yeah, he's really started to pay off. He started his career. He was waived by the Vikings in 2019. Then the Eagles acquired him off of waivers in 2019. Then he was placed on COVID IR in 2020. Then he was activated in COVID IR in 2020. So he's pretty much he's had to work his way to get to this point. 6th-round draft pick, and has a spot, a chance to get the starting role. And like you said, he played well last year. Played in 16 games, started in 3, had 5 pass deflections, had an interception. What I like to see here outside of those numbers, because we're not worried about that, 62 combined tackles. Like to see that. And he also had 62 total tackles, and so he had a pretty solid season, but that's as a reserve. This is different now, where you're going to be the starting safety. So how do you think that position battle kind of plays out? Because you have him. You also have Kayvon Wallace, who they drafted, a couple years ago as well. And then they have an exciting rookie in Reed Blankenship, who was just an absolute stud and playmaker at Middle Tennessee, for his 4 years. Probably one of the best defenders in Conference USA, you could say, with his time over with the Blue Raiders.
Yeah, I think it's a big year for Wallace. I think that he's kind of in a little bit of a make or break year in terms of if he's going to be, a part of the Eagles defense moving forward. He's definitely made some plays to this point, but it is kind of, time to see if he could be a starter on this defense, if he could be, one of the guys that's out there for, 60, 70 snaps a game. But like we were just talking about, I like Epps as well. Blankenship's an interesting rookie, see if he can make it on the roster, if he can contribute on special teams, kind of make his way from there. But that is probably the one, questionable position still for the Eagles a little bit. Is that, safety position. It's definitely not the strongest. We mentioned it. Rodney McLeod's in Indy now. I think Anthony Harris is definitely a reliable safety. He definitely made some plays last year, like you were mentioning. It was good that they were able to bring him in. It would have been nice if they could have brought him in that year that he led the NFL in interceptions. But hey, at the end of the day, reliable safety, makes a lot of plays, hard, physical, tackler. I think he's a good Philly guy. I think he's a good Philly guy for the defense. So yeah, safety is kind of still something that I have some questions about. We'll kind of see how that plays out in the summer, and then early in the season will really be when it's put to the test against some of these explosive offenses in the NFL. But there's worse groups out there for sure.
There's definitely yeah. You're right. There definitely is some worse groups out there, and the Eagles are not. And again, I think what helps them out in this situation is when you do have a solidified, cornerback spot with Slay, with Bradberry, with Maddox in the slot, with Anthony Harris at the other safety spot. It kind of gives them, it gives you some sort of freedom to be like, okay, like we can put somebody there who's not as experienced because we do have experience surrounding that player. But don't get twisted. He's gonna have to learn, he's gonna have to know, when teams are gonna try to take him over the top and everything like that. But I think having those collection of guys around him, I think it'll make it better. It'll make it better off the ease if he does win the starting job into that starter's job. Because like I said, the difference being a reserve, coming in, certain packages, certain nickel dime packages, things of that ilk is now a whole different ball game when you're the starter and teams are going to game plan. How can we take advantage of Marcus Epps when he's in this spot, when he's in that spot, when the Eagles are in that coverage?
Yeah, definitely. And playing on special teams as well, playing maybe more special teams reps towards going to that starting role. You're out on the field 70 snaps a game. That is going to be a big part for this defense because, these offenses in the NFL, that the Eagles are going to be going up against, they can really throw the ball nowadays. And if the safety spot isn't solidified, it is going to be a liability. You mentioned it. That corner position is really strong. That's definitely going to help them if they do go a little bit more man. But we saw last year, Jonathan Gannon is more of a, base zone guy, sit the corners back, give the receiver some cushion, try to make plays from there. So you got to rely on the safeties a lot in those types of defenses. They have a big role, protecting that deep part of the field, maybe coming up, being a robber in the middle of the field. So it'll be big to see who wins that. That's definitely going to be something to watch in the summer, is that safety position next to Anthony Harris, because it looks like Anthony Harris will be out there in that strong role. But who's going to be out there patrolling the center field, basically? Who's going to be out there patrolling the back third of the defense? Right. So that's going to be a big question for the Eagles defense.
Yeah, definitely, for sure will, because you look at their first two opponents, right? Detroit, Jared Goff is Jared Goff, but they have some weapons, right? They still have TJ Hawkinson. They have Jameson Williams won't be ready to go, but they have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have Josh Reynolds, who really looked nice for them, during the second half part of that year. And they added DJ Chark, who can stretch the field. So they're going to be tested.
That's a good pickup. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be tested there. And then the week after that, we're dealing with Thielen and Diggs. And potentially Dalvin Cook in the slot because they're going to try to work him in the passing game. So, yeah, they're going to be tested. So they just got to be ready for, what they see. But again, having those collection of corners is just going to make the world of difference, for Epps or whoever wins that job. All right, we got one more topic here before we wrap the pod. Appreciate everyone once again tuning in and checking out Total Sports Live Podcast. Really appreciate it as always. Last topic of the night, Harrison. We got to talk about underrated players who can have a big summer. Every summer, there's always that one guy in training camp in the preseason who just stands out among the rest. I think of the names you mentioned it before the show. The names of Henry Josie, or I'm trying to think who else was in that same ilk.
Martin Gilliard.
Gilliard. Yeah.
Way back.
Gilliard. So, AFL guy, Gilliard.
Right.
Gilliard. I'm trying to think who else. Was Boston Scott one of those guys? I don't think so.
I forget when they got Boston Scott.
I think they got
in. He was good. I don't know when it was, but he was playing. Yeah, he was really good right away. I'm trying to think too.
I'm trying to think who.
There was a receiver a few years ago that we both really liked. That wound up playing in the CFL.
You know what I'm talking about? Who was it? I can't think of him. I know who you're talking about.
Right. I think he was on like Ottawa or Toronto.
I can see the name, but it's not clicking.
I don't know either.
I can see the face and it's not clicking.
We both have just an encyclopedia of football.
Right.
Sometimes you can't find a file,
Right. No, my brain is running right now.
I know who I'm talking about, but I don't,
Right. I know. Yeah, I'm trying to think who it was. I know who you're talking about too, and I can't think about it.
We'll be on all night. Yeah.
It's guys like him. It's not guys like the infamous MBT, aka McLeod Bethel Thompson.
Oh yes, hey, CFL legend though, still playing out there.
I've heard he's actually starting where the Argos.
He's good out there too. He's a really good player. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Had a brief stint in the arena. Big shout out to McLeod Bethel Thompson.
And whether he in the UFL,
he's been everywhere.
Yeah,
we love quarterbacks like that, man. Shout out to
MBT making it do what it do in the CFL. So we're looking for guys who could be that for the Eagles and say, hey, I might not make the 53-man roster, but you kind of need to consider me for this practice for one of these practice squad spots, which are going to be highly coveted, as always. So who are some of the guys that Harrison, that people should be watching out for this summer? Who could be playmakers this summer for the Eagles?
Well, not sure how it's going to shake out for him, but Devin Allen it's going to just be fun to watch. I mean, obviously tonight he set a record as a track runner, ran at Franklin Field the other week in the Penn relays. It'll just be fun to see him play. He hasn't played football since 2016. Just fun to see how that transition is. Going back to the secondary, though, I really like Tay Gowan. I think he kind of got just lost in the mix a little bit last year after they acquired him in the Zach Ertz trade from Arizona. Younger guy who sat out the COVID year at UCF, but had a nice 2019 there. But, when you go from sitting out to then making that jump to the NFL as a late round guy who got traded midseason, you got to assume there's going to be some, growing pains there. But gets to take that second year here with the Eagles. This is where he wanted to play anyway. Heard him mention that in his inaugural press conference with the Eagles, that he had kind of thought he was going to get drafted by the Eagles. Arizona took him one pick before, winds up getting traded to the Eagles midseason. So just kind of wound up working out for him to where, this is where he wanted to be. And he's here now. So, you kind of like to hear that from a player, that he wanted to be in Philly. He wanted to make it work here. And that he's a younger guy who can make plays. Also like Mac McCain from NC A&T was a really good player there down at the FCS ranks. I think he could have a big year for the Eagles. Another guy who they got, I believe, midseason, or, he might have went to Denver midseason and then came back to the Eagles. But another guy who's been on 2 NFL rosters, kind of seen some different comp in practice and things like that. So, and then for my last one will be Britton Covey, the receiver and kick returner out of Utah. Really interested in him more so as a kick returner. Just think that he can make some
Which
plays
the
there.
Eagles need. Which the Eagles
Exactly.
need.
That's exactly why. You know what I mean? The Eagles don't have that solidified kick returner. Jalen Reagor did it some last year on punt returns, had some problems, made some plays though at the same time. I'm not a Jalen Reagor hater. But I think Britton Covey definitely could make some plays in the preseason on kick returns, punt returns. Make some real interesting plays and kind of be one of those people that fans are hoping to see more of on offense. I think he'll probably be more special teams to start his career, but just someone that I'll definitely be keeping my eye on as well. But they've got a lot of guys like that this year, the Eagles. A lot of underrated younger guys, kind of coming from different places, maybe played on a few NFL teams, kind of trying to get their footing. I'll be interested to see, if they look at the USFL at all, if they pick up a few CFL guys before camp. They've kind of been known to do things like that, in the past. They picked up some AFL guys in the past, like right before or during camp with their final roster spots, or just giving someone a look if someone gets hurt. So Howie Roseman and company have always been pretty good about bringing in interesting talent and, underrated guys. So always good to watch Eagles preseason games. Listen to Ross Tucker on the color commentary and, enjoy some underrated prospects.
Most definitely. And like you said, yeah, the Eagles 90-man roster is just loaded. I mean, we're talking talent across the board. And for me, like you said, Devin Allen definitely, someone who, like we talked about, before the show, with that type of speed, with what he was able to do just today in the 110 meters with his speed. I mean, I would like to see what that speed could do on a field and with a ball in his hands. And if that could equate, then you might got something there. I don't know if it's good enough to be a 53-man roster type of dude, but practice squad, you might got something. You might got something there. So definitely him. I'm looking, at that tight end spot. It's very loaded outside of Dallas Goedert. There's some competition there. Trying to see, will Grant Calcaterra be somebody that steps up and makes a name for himself? Had a pretty productive college career, both at Oklahoma and SMU. Obviously dealt with some concussion, issues, but glad to see that, I think he retired at one point.
He did. Yeah.
And so glad to see that he's back on the football field healthy. And if he can stay healthy, that could be someone to keep an eye out for as well, along with my guy Tyree Jackson.
Right.
Who's rehabbing. That's my guy right there. I want to say Kennedy Brooks. I think another guy from Oklahoma. He had a very good collegiate career. We'll like to see how he fares with that running back room. I think the first 3 spots are pretty much solidified. I mean, some might think Boston Scott could be on the roster bubble. I don't think so.
I don't think so
But
either.
I think they're pretty much set there. And then defensively for me, Marvin Wilson, I think, is a guy that I think went under the radar. We saw him a lot in the last game because there was obviously nothing to play for. But a guy who was a beast in the middle of that defense at Florida State. We'll like to see what he does in year 2. Noah Ellis is a guy that Emory Hunt told me to keep an eye out for. So if Emory is telling me to keep an eye out for this guy and said that he could be very good, my ears are listening. They're up. They're wired. I need I need to know why. So I'm definitely excited to see what Noah Ellis has
Ellis
to
went to
bring.
Idaho, right?
Yep, went to
Yeah, I
Idaho.
thought so. Yeah.
So definitely want to see how he plays. And then, like you said, the DBs, I mean, the corners, I mean, Lord have mercy, all the young talent. I mean, it's going to be great competition. You're talking about Kerry Vincent Jr., who went to LSU. We're talking Jimmy Moreland, who the Eagles just picked up. He had an outstanding college career at JMU with the Dukes. Mac McClain, like you said, out of North Carolina A&T. Who else? We're looking at Tay Gowan, like you said, Mario Goodrich out of Clemson, who I think got a really nice signing bonus in the UDFA period, which is very appealing. And I think Emory had him ranked high in his draft guide as one of his, top 4, top 5, top 10-ish, top 10-ish boundary corners in his draft guide. You got him, Zach McPherson as well, Josh Jobe out of Alabama. So I mean, there's some names. There's a lot of names in this group and just on this roster. So I think, like you said, there's a lot of guys that I think will make some names for himself. It's going to, create some storylines to watch for. And even if, even if they don't make the 53-man roster or even make the practice squad, we could honestly see some of these guys in the XFL in a few months later, down the road.
Definitely, especially at that quarterback position. I think that's going to be big for the XFL to look at some guys like that and just look at those roster cuts as a whole. But, even if, guys from the Eagles wind up going to other teams, we've seen that as well. Have a good preseason with Philly, sign on the practice squad somewhere else, maybe get a 53 shot somewhere else. I mean, me and you are big on alternative football leagues. Go out and play in Canada, go play in the XFL, USFL, arena ball. There's a lot of opportunities out there for guys. So
the ELF.
Hey, there you go. Right. You're up in the football league. That's exciting to see.
The European League of Football.
It's good to see that's going well. They've got Jim Tomsula out there, the former 49ers coach. Got some good broadcast coverage, I think. So
yeah, got some recent draft guys over there. I've heard Jackson Erdman from D2 is out there.
There you go. So we're always rooting for any type of football. You know what I mean? It gets funny business wise, definitely in these spring leagues and these alternative leagues, but any opportunity for guys to go out there and play and showcase their abilities, we're always rooting for. So that's why, hey, listen, anybody that's on the 90-man roster in the NFL, you got to give them a big shout out. That's a really talented football player. However it shakes out for them, even if they, wind up getting released or anything like that, it's definitely an accomplishment in and of itself.
Hey, most definitely. And I think that's going to put a wrap on this podcast. Thanks again for everybody tuning in and listening to the Total Sports Live podcast. Really appreciate it. Like we saying, like you will see on the ticker when this is uploaded, you can follow us on Twitter at Total Sports Live, at Jovan10, at Harry Brown-Russo is right there on the ticker, especially for those who are probably watching this on Twitch. It's all right there for you. Like I said earlier, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. It's probably there too. Wherever you get your podcast from, I'm pretty sure it's there somewhere. Just download it. It's also on Anchor. It's also on Anchor as well. So there you go there. TotalSportsLive.com. I think that's about it. Harrison, anything else before we wrap here on the show?
I think that's good on my end, man. Just looking forward to some football this fall. We'll stick with USFL and arena for now, but yeah, man, always a pleasure on here talking with you. Definitely check out the site, subscribe to the pod, and appreciate everybody tuning in.
Hey, most definitely. We will be back later this week for another pod. We're since we did this pod a little late, we're going to be coming right back with another one.
Right.
It likely will not be on the day of the finals. Finals are on Monday, and then I think Game 6 is on Thursday. So in between that window, we will give you guys another podcast. Then we'll hit you with another one after that, but probably on a more spacious window.
Move back around, yeah.
Right, yeah. Moving right back around. But hey, that's going to wrap up this podcast. For me and Harrison, everyone have a good one, and we will talk to you all very soon.